they're asking for lab space, and I say, how many employees do you have? And they go, none. I need 2,000 square feet of lab, and I'm going to go there once a month.
Yeah.
So this is episode 2, Bio Briefs. Been 2 months since we talked last. To be honest, not much has changed in the market. Market still remains pretty
slow. I mean,
slow,
we're still
down.
not seeing the funding. We're still not seeing all the things that drive it. But there's some bright spots in the market. We're starting to see interest in manufacturing. People are starting to lean into their scaling. They're going to try and get things into patients at a higher quantity, and so manufacturing is still a hot topic. The biggest question I have on the manufacturing side is there any value from one tenant to another? We've talked about this before, but I can't really put my finger on many transactions that have happened where a GMP compliance space has gone from one tenant to another.
Yeah, I think there are probably more than you know. I think the reality behind a lot of these manufacturing facilities is that the ones that have value are definitely geared towards cell and gene therapy. Cell and gene therapy is relatively new. So, I think we're just seeing some of these facilities trade hands, and a lot of the things in terms of actually trading hands, this isn't a real estate transaction. This is an investment banking transaction where a company is acquired based on their facility value. Unfortunately, when the company's not doing well. Yeah. So I think Mustang Bio in Boston was acquired to put their facility from the Chinese CDMO, forget their name. But, I think we don't see a lot of those. Those don't hit the open market. Right. But I do think there's value. I mean, if you can track down the company, the SOPs, the architects, the engineers, some folks that built it and can give you some reassurance that can work and the FDA gives you a green light, yeah.
Yeah.
Go.
Well, yeah, as long as the process fits the layout, I totally agree. I'm just saying I haven't seen a whole lot of those in the market where you can make that exchange. And so the common request that we get is go find me GMP space. Yeah. And we know from years and decades of experiences that that's just not a reality in the market. And trying to advise somebody that, hey, this is an expensive market to build anything, let alone clean environments that are GMP compliant. They feel like there's got to be a better solution out there, and I wonder if that's going to come to fruition here as we start to see some of the companies, like you're saying, struggle to make ends meet into more of an acquisition. And so is that acquisition based on the intellectual property that they're working on, or is the acquisition based on the facilities they've created? It's kind of an interesting pivot in the market potentially.
Yeah, and I think these facilities, these manufacturing facilities, are enticing, especially from a pilot scale, smaller end. I think the commercial facilities are good and great, but I think there are going to be very few tenants that actually follow through on a commercial facility. Right. I think a lot of people are trying to compare the cost of a commercial facility with the pricing that they're seeing from CDMOs. Yeah. Right. Can we do this for cheaper? Can we do this on our own? And right now, with the construction industry where it is, the answer is no. Yeah. Unfortunately, not saying that the CDMO pricing is cheap by any means, but I think the cost of construction and then the inherent risk of just having this large lease liability, right, from a transaction and construction standpoint, I just don't think the risk outweighs the benefit from a lot of instances. So we are getting leveraged a lot in terms of the companies that are doing well in today's market are looking towards commercial launch potentially because they're getting good data, they're going and progressing through clinical trials, and they want to know what that cost is. And then there's a lot of, are there existing facilities in the United States, right? That goes back to your standpoint of, we want existing. And, these manufacturing facilities, if there's any validity behind them and they're actually in good working order and, they were recently built by a credible company and they were FDA approved, I think those are the facilities we don't see hit the open market, right? Because that company is unfortunately, the one relinquishing themselves of that facility are somewhat looking for a way out. And so that way out is seen by the investment banking industry before it's seen by the real estate industry.
Fair point.
And so that's when you see a company being not evaluated maybe on their technology, but like you mentioned, the facilities they have on hand and their hard assets, right? What is the equipment that they have? What facilities do they have if they own them? Yeah. If it's a lease, it's harder, right?
Yeah.
That's not your asset. So it's a little bit more nuanced, and I think we've done enough of these national manufacturing requirements to understand that not a lot out there. I think there's a lot of shell condition where you can take some existing lab and maybe some existing office and then look towards creating some manufacturing, or maybe some landlords are getting a little creative right now in a down market and providing a little bit more of a robust base building infrastructure that can accommodate a manufacturing requirement. But we've done enough of these to know that it's also hard to step into an existing facility, because whoever's your VP of manufacturing or whoever's running your process, it's very specific to what they want, right? They've been doing this a long time and they have a certain way they've done things, and that might not translate to the way that somebody built the facility prior. Not saying they can't fix it, but I think what you'll find out is that once you make changes to a facility like that, you might as well just start from scratch.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, in a lot of cases, people are looking for what's the base infrastructure that we can build off of. I think that's where the real value is. It's hard to make sense of the walls and the layout, except for, you mentioned earlier, and I think it's a good point, when you're starting to get into this kind of repetitive footprint of an autologous cell and gene therapy manufacturing layout. I think there might be value in that between tenants until the automation takes hold, until they take all of that huge process right now that's very labor intensive and heavy and put it all in a clean box. Yeah. So you don't need that huge footprint. You're not scaling out anymore. You're not really scaling up either. You're just condensing the process and the amount of infrastructure needed to service it. But I do feel like there might be some good transition between those in just that kind of cell culture type of clean environment.
Yeah. It was funny. I think I had 4 clients trying to solve for pilot scale manufacturing at the same time in an autologous setting. And you could almost, if you had trace paper, you could put all of the plans on top of each other and they were somewhat similar. Oh, yeah. From the clean areas, I think the supporting areas can differ a little bit between size, but it's all the same functionality. Yeah. So if you're looking for a pilot scale facility for a growing cell therapy company that's, wants to progress something in their pipeline, it's 10,000 square feet. It's 3 to 4 clean suites. It's, the clean corridor. It's the QA, QC, maybe an R&D lab in the top left corner. Yeah. But that is something we're seeing in the market.
Here's an interesting question. If you could advise a landlord, if you could say to a landlord, hey, here's what the market needs, and here's how you can design it, and it'll lease, and maybe even lease at a premium.
We're doing that right now.
Could you do that? I mean, could a landlord actually pull that off?
I mean, I think.
And then how big is the space?
I think there's ever a time in the market where that could potentially happen. It's right now. I mean, so much vacancy is being sat on right now in shell condition by so many of these groups that I think everybody's trying to think of, how do I get a leg up on my competition? And I think what they've seen in the market right now is that the only thing moving right now is these manufacturing requirements. I think R&D space is readily available. Nobody's going to come in and fit out an R&D lab, below 15,000 square feet right now because it can be found in the market.
Yeah.
But manufacturing can't. And so, I think some landlords are sending us test bits and just saying, hey, you've had a couple groups. Does this make sense? Would this lease? And the answer is maybe. But I think you need to, I caution the landlord of actually building it. I think you need to bring it to some sort of approval, like with the county, maybe some pre-permitted kind of ready to be submitted, because in all likelihood there's going to be some changes that a company is going to want to make. I don't think it's going to be like hey, shift this wall. This is pretty significant from an HVAC standpoint, because ultimately this isn't just an R&D lab that somebody stepping into and just performing research. This needs to be somewhat stamped by the FDA.
Yeah.
And so if they already have some sort of plan with the FDA, that needs to be put into place in whatever they're building.
Right. But so set aside the layout for a second, and let's just talk about the cost. Let's talk about the cost to build this. I think if you take the plan you just talked about with office, lab, clean areas, and let's call it warehousing, storage, you probably come to a blended average around $600 or $700 a foot. Who's paying for that? And if somebody built that, and let's say a landlord ponied up the $600 a foot to build it, could they get $100 a foot in rent because of it?
So, I mean, this is going to be a hot take maybe, but I mean, if you're a therapeutic company and somebody's offering you a turnkey delivery at no cost to you out of pocket, and you just need to find this in rent and term, jump.
Right.
Jump at it.
Right.
Because, you might be in the state of Maryland and you could be paying a freight that's similar to San Francisco, Boston type rate, but, you're getting a manufacturing facility where you're not dumping the delta, like the $500 delta it needs to be built. So, I mean,
landlord's financing it. It saves you that huge upfront capital. And so maybe there is a place in the market for that.
I think there is. I think we're testing it right now. I think this will be interesting as it pans out over the next 6 months because, again, it's new space. It's expensive space to build, right, due to the HVAC requirements mainly, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the clean atmosphere that goes along with a lot of the clean suites themselves. But I do think there's a market there. And I do think that this is an area of real estate that I think needs to get a little bit more specialized in the sense where, I don't think it makes sense to do anything above a pilot scale.
Right.
Right. You're trying to help somebody through phase 1, phase 2. But yeah, I think there's a market.
Yeah. Well, your point earlier about you're seeing the same footprint, the same floor plan over and over and over again, I think starts to push things that direction where you could say, look, we've got 5 people that we've seen in the past 7 months that need this. It just boils down to the financing. And so if you can play with the landlord's money and not have to take that out of what limited raise you can get in today's market, and the landlord's willing to take the risk because they've designed something that has good residual value, I don't know why that wouldn't play.
And I think this is going to be tooting our own horn, and that's also why you hire a savvy brokerage team on the landlord side, right? You're building this and you want to see the residual value, but you also need to be smart in terms of how you do space turnover, right? Yeah. And so you need somebody advising you on how this tenant's leaving on their own accord, right? Maybe before their lease expiration and they're growing in your portfolio, say. How do you make sure that space is ready to go for the next tenant, right? Make sure that you still have communication with that tenant or you have some documentations in place, you have them leave it there. And that way it's a clean kind of handoff to whoever would want to take it next. And you need to kind of maintain an operable state. You can't just shut it down at some level.
Right.
So that's also something that landlords need to take into consideration. This isn't just a turn off the switch and when it's vacant and you can just let it sit there.
Great point.
This needs some sort of maintenance to it, where it's not like office. It's not like the R&D space in that sense where there's a little bit more of a care aspect to maintaining these spaces between tenants.
That's right. Yeah, they'll need to find a way to hold the value beyond just the improvements. They'll need to hold the value in their ability to stand this up for another tenant very quickly with confidence, knowing that there isn't a bunch of mold growing in the HVAC and things haven't been just shut off.
So I think that's why you and I, the spaces that we've seen historically have just been these old shut down clean rooms, and people see a clean suite and they're like, oh my God, look at this.
Yeah.
But we're like, yeah, but what's going on up there behind that drywall? Do you know? I don't know.
Right.
Is it worth the risk?
Yeah.
You think FDA is going to come here and get this approved? And I think the reality is no. So I think those are the spaces we've seen to date, and those need to be demolished. And unfortunately, if there's no records, again, it has been maintained. It's that just needs a bulldozer.
Yeah.
But I do think there is, and from a shell condition, we're seeing this done in North Carolina a lot. I think where landlords are offering a pretty robust base building for commercial facilities where there's chillers in place, there's a pretty robust roof, there's HVAC at some level. They've increased the gas, they've increased the electric to the facility, and I think those have real value. Mm-hmm. More so than kind of just high bay industrial product that people are trying to dish out a large tenant improvement allowance and justify higher rent. So I think people are getting a little more savvy. I think this is it's a new type of real estate. I think a lot of people are just getting focused in it. There's been guys that have been focused in it for a while, but I feel like people are just kind of getting smart on it on the landlord side.
Yeah, no, I agree. And quickly, I mean, they're bringing in good people that understand the space and understand the nuances to this versus just basic people holder office space or industrial space. And so having qualifying the landlord from a tenant's perspective is an important step where you have to say, okay, does this group either have a team on the project from a design, engineering, and maintenance standpoint that's savvy, or is the landlord themselves savvy, or both? So that you can confidently say to your client, your tenant, "Hey, you're gonna be well taken care of here."
Yeah. I'm not an engineer by any means, but I wanted to bring up your point about automation because I think it's an important one. Because we're seeing it with AI, we're seeing it with a lot. I mean, I'm meeting with companies that they're asking for lab space, and I say, "How many employees do you have?" And they go, "None. I need 2,000 square feet of lab, and I'm going to go there once a month."
Yeah.
Just to make sure that nothing's beeping. And so,
yeah.
I think that is the way of the future where you're going to go into these labs and, we even have clients, creating custom robotics that are going to be, operating the lab. And I do think that's the way of the future. Unfortunately and fortunately, right? I think that, of course, hurts the labor pool. But, I think for a life science company looking to bring first-in-class therapeutics, I think removing the human potential flaws and focusing more on robotics and AI can lead to better outcomes because you lose some of the risk.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that is going to shrink footprints most likely, right? You don't need the staffing, the parking lots to accommodate these large manufacturing uses or even the smaller ones. You could just have some building in the middle of a city and it could just be operating by itself and manufacturing drugs.
I think you're going to still have the infrastructure requirements, but I agree with you. I mean, I think you'll have a far more consolidated footprint and potentially easier to achieve infrastructure because you just know what you're servicing with these machines or with this process, as opposed to, like you're saying, the parking requirements and hey, are my employees going to want to come here?
It's going to be like the Ford plant for drugs.
Yeah, it's kind of on one hand, it's right. It takes the risk out of it. On the other hand, it could take some of the creativity out of it. But yeah, I agree. I think things are definitely going the way of automation. So,
so I think manufacturing is the biggest trend that we're seeing right now. But I do think that we're seeing some bright spots in the market. Some companies are getting some seed stage funding. That's pretty exciting. I think people, since the COVID shutdown, have now been able to get back into the clinic, and there's good data being proven. And I think that's going to lead to funding coming in, and hopefully the public markets open up early next year. I don't have a crystal ball.
Keep saying
but
that.
We talk to a lot of smart people, and but I think
just another 6 months, right?
We're seeing people start to do some IPO readiness and actually go public in today's market, which, it's not at the capacity and the numbers that we were seeing pre-2020 and 2020. But, I think that's a good bellwether that more are going to continue to try, especially if they have the right data set, the right staff, and they think that they have cool technology.
We're going to need a flushing of the system, so to speak, where you start to see these desperation type of deals happen with companies that are burning really close to the end of their cash. And that'll trigger, I think, fire sales on their IP, M&A activity.
I think that's going to be this summer.
And probably some of the facilities-driven acquisitions that you were talking about earlier. When your valuation is below your cash holdings, there's obvious issues there, and so we'll watch those closely and figure out what's going to happen from a real estate standpoint. But I think you're right. There's definitely some things in the market that are promising, and I think will hopefully yield some growth here. Not crazy 2021 growth, but growth.
I agree.
Yeah. So, well, good. Great hot take. Bio Briefs, episode 2 in the bag here. So we'll talk to you guys again soon.